Hello and welcome back to another episode of Nick Tiffany's Movie Reviews, coming at you online and in print format at nicktiffany.com, in audio format wherever you get your podcasts, and even in video on YouTube. Today we are back with another multi-review show. Saw many different things in the last couple weeks here. It's been wedding season, so my movie viewing and reviewing ability has been hampered just a little bit. Never in a bad way. Just a great time of year. Nothing to complain about on that front, but it's nice to kind of dig back into the movies. So we're going to talk Horizon, Kevin Costner's expansive Western that is struggling right now at the box office, and even more news about its sequel kind of came along today. We're going to talk MaXXXine, which is the third Ty West Mia Goth collaboration following X and Pearl. We're also going to talk Yorgos Lanthimos' Kinds of Kindness, coming off of All the Poor Things, Madness, and Hysteria. Another Emma Stone project bringing Jesse Plemons into the mix. Totally didn't know what I was getting into before going in there. Lots to say about that one. And then on VOD, we just continue to roll with new things like The Bike Rider is already on VOD. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is now out on video on demand as well. Excited to check that one back out. And then, there's all sorts of good little movie news we'll touch on towards the end. But I think we should just jump right in. Let's talk about Horizon. Horizon has been the subject of so much discussion, so much anger. For any fan of Yellowstone, anybody who's followed Kevin Costner's career reconnaissance, or his own Matthew reconnaissance, as we called it back in the day, Costner was killing it on Yellowstone. Midway through this latest season, I say this latest like any of it came out this last year. There was just a pause. And I'd read, Taylor Sheridan, granted, is doing like 8 different shows across multiple networks, still starting new ones as well. So he has really, I don't want to say outgrown Yellowstone, but obviously they were ramping things down. The show can't go on for forever, and it's clear everybody else is starting to do other things as well. So Kevin Costner, in his own words, watching an interview for this movie, there was a lot of scheduling conflict between when they were going to film from Yellowstone. He already had contractual obligations to have actors, different production people filming his movie on certain dates. There was a lot of, back and forth there, and he kind of had to put his foot down in his own words, and say, hey, I've got these people relying on me. Took a mortgage out on his house, put up something like $20 million of his own money just to get this made. Cost him, his wife got divorced during the process. It's been a messy, arduous time for Kevin Costner, and so the uphill battle is still only beginning. I feel like everybody, Costner included, knew that Horizon wasn't necessarily going to be the box office smash that Despicable Me 4 and Inside Out 2 have even been, or even perhaps Dune 2, but it's been a slow start for Horizon, not nearly what they were hoping for, but again, the film didn't have the biggest marketing budget because a lot of this money's coming out of Costner's own pocket. And it's just upsetting to see, because I think the movie is pretty fantastic for a 3-hour multi-story character sprawling epic. And this is only part 1 of part 2. Part 2, which was supposed to come out in the middle of August, which is now kind of on a theatrical hiatus, as they're going to move Horizon onto video on demand next week. So you can watch Horizon at home and in the theaters as early as next Tuesday. It's just bizarre. It's sad to see, because I sat for 3 hours watching this film. Gladly would have sat for another 3 almost immediately afterwards. And while I don't think that the whole of the movie is completely perfect, or that maybe the way that they are trying to weave some of the stories or some of the kind of dead space between certain characters and tales, all of that aside, I think what Kevin Costner is doing on this grand scale is just fascinating. And it's clear that he has, great reverence and a great respect, uh, not just for white people, not just for Americans, not just in, we say Americans, and in this film, really you see how much America was made up of all these different migrants, how American it is to have the same belief that you could come to this country, that you can move out west, you can create a place for your own, you can raise a family. It's not going to be easy work. And Costner really goes into painstaking detail, just kind of across multiple, whether you're coming by wagon, whether you are trying to settle in a new land, if it's just you out there, you've got to do everything for yourself. And, the further and further away generations get from the Wild West, from a time where laws are still being created, there's unrest. This takes place kind of within a 15-year span before and after the Civil War. So there's tons of politics going on in the country as a whole. But really, when you look at, I don't want to say the South, but when you look at this kind of old Western way of thinking, or an old-fashioned way of thinking, to a degree, there was this notion of, it doesn't matter where you're from, it doesn't matter what you've done. What matters is if you're capable and you're able, you're working. And everybody's got to pick up the slack. There's not a ton of cushy jobs back then. And there's some involvement with the Union troops, different government troops, and kind of looking at their role and not necessarily protecting and policing certain plots of land, but this whole notion of we're going to go west. You've got thousands and thousands of people heading west trying to make a new life. People losing children along the way, wagons breaking down, losing food, water. There's nothing necessarily established out far west for some of these cases too. And so the fact that so many people were so willing to risk everything and to work through impossible conditions, just for a shot at a better life for themselves, is something I think that the film does such a good job of showing. And really, a lot of filmmakers and a lot of stories could go one way with how they tell a story. Sure, you can see some of the brutality and savagery perhaps caused by some of the Native Americans, whether it's to white people or whether it's to other different groups of Native Americans. You also see how awful so many white people and so many American citizens were in the notion of hunting down and killing those Native Americans, oftentimes for nothing, whether for sport, for their scalps. And the film really kind of touches on the different politics around every group of people who was trying to survive in this land. I think the way they went about telling the story, introducing the characters, how they kind of start to weave different journeys and where people at. You're up in the Montana and Wyoming territories, you're down in the South, you're moving across, Oklahoma, some of this stuff. And so it just, visually, they did such a beautiful job of showing just how splendid this country is too. And, they make a point to kind of discuss the fact that hundreds of years from this time, it would never look like this again. And for all the change that's happening in the world, it's nice that you can still look out unobstructed at nature and just take in the beauty of what this country has to offer. And you can't help but watch it, kind of feel a little bit of sadness knowing there's probably a McDonald's, there's probably a dozen high rises here at this river now, paddle boarders, whatever. It's no harping on paddle boarders or it's just this notion of, wow, I could have never imagined quite how beautiful this place was. And the more stuffed this world becomes with technology, with buildings, with unnecessary everything, so many people find themselves looking back to nature and looking to go back in time almost. This whole nostalgia for a previous time. Sure, politics and things were not great at all. But again, you watch this film and you see how much of a struggle it was just to survive and how rapidly changing things were all the time, from your environment to politics to growing industries. And so I don't know, Kevin Costner is tackling a lot with this film. Not a lot of stones are left unturned as far as the lifestyle of different people were going back there. I saw a funny post online by someone. They said this is kind of like Kevin Costner's Roots, but for white people. I just chuckled reading that. I thought that was great. But then they go on to say, this is not to disparage the film. It's just really interesting how they're telling all these different stories and to see where these different groups of people will collide and just how many different types of people there are in this country and what opportunity means to each individual and what people can get out of a life in this country. It just, I was fascinated. It's obviously not often that we get Westerns today and not ones on this kind of a grand of scale. And for everything that I know Costner put into this film, for the talent that you've got in the film, and for some of the just subtle, deeply human moments that they're able to touch on, I really, really enjoyed Horizon. And so I was really bummed today to read this news that it's going to be hidden VOD, which I understand allows it to reach a broader audience earlier, perhaps, especially if it costs a ton to keep the movie in theaters. But I would really hope that at a later date they put part 2 back in, because this is one of those movies you should see in a movie theater on a giant screen, loud sound, taking in breathtaking cinematography. It's going to look great at home. I know it's going to look great at home, but it's just kind of a shame that it's just not doing too well, unfortunately, at the box office. Don't go into this movie also thinking this is going to be Yellowstone, the movie, because Kevin Costner is a part of it. I have heard this from more than a few people now who've kind of come into my work and have talked about the movie. And it's like, oh, I was really expecting something a little quicker, something a little faster paced, some more witty dialogue, perhaps, or, these just outlandish train station visits, whatever. It's not that. It is not that at all. So you would do yourself a service not imagining that this is going to be just like Yellowstone going in. I think it's a far deeper story that he's telling, and one that is worth hearing, I would say. So if you've seen the movie, let me know in the comments what you thought of it. If you're looking forward to part 2, there's going to be part 3 and 4 as well. This is a sprawling saga. And so, it's just fascinating to see it go the theatrical route rather than miniseries on TV. So, it's just Costner's taking a huge risk with this one. And whether you like all of it or not, I will always, always, go to bat for someone who continues to take artistic risks at a time where, AI would give you some calculated number or some sort of story that they're like, no, we should put this on Disney Plus. We should do an Agatha Witch series for Disney Plus. Because that's what Marvel needs right now. Yeah. I'm not going to talk about that trailer, but clearly that's one of those pre-strike, would never get greenlit now. Don't want to write it off like Warner Brothers writes off their stuff. So they're going to let Agatha go, but I don't know about that one. But we can transition now into something a little lighter, perhaps. Not so light, but I saw MaXXXine this last weekend, which again is reuniting Mia Goth and Ty West in this multiple spanning story from X and Pearl. Pearl being more of an origin story for this sort of tortured Carrie-like character, stuck in this small town farm world, unable to get off and get out and live the life of a Rockette and these dancers and these wonderful girls. And so, there's this, I think Pearl for me is going to be my favorite. Just going into this movie, I already enjoyed it more than X. X being definitely more of a thriller, horror, kind of funny-ish type movie. A little more gory, a little more involved. But Pearl had this real old-fashioned feel to it. This great, from the cinematography to the soundtrack, it felt like you were watching something that was filmed in 1930 or 1940. How everything was handled, it just really showcased to me, too, another side of Mia Goth and just what she's capable of as an actress. She's got this 8-minute monologue that for the first time watching it, I was just like, she's incredible. Oh my God, she's terrifying. And knowing that MaXXXine was going to be coming out, knowing that this was going to be sort of a third film to kind of tie this trilogy together, I was definitely looking forward to it. It was going to be a 1980s Hollywood film star type thriller, and so I don't know. Already it was like, okay, this is going to be an interesting direction. There's been this adult film kind of background almost, or this notion of, watching dirty pictures and acting in dirty pictures and what this all can kind of lead to. And so MaXXXine is an adult film star trying to break into Hollywood, and right off the bat kind of showcases how incredible of an actress she is, or as Mia Goth, just how phenomenal she is there. And it really sets a tone very early on for like, okay, we're already starting. She didn't come to play. Curious to see what this film is like and what goes on. And then the film kind of takes more of a turn. You've got the Night Stalker, this LA killer kind of lurking in the background of the news and certain things. And so we're spending time talking to different girls that she knows who either end up missing or dying, certain things. And so it launches into this sort of pseudo investigation, and you've got people kind of who know Pearl's past. Kevin Bacon's this private detective kind of hunting her down, and there's some great gore in the movie. There's some like really great kills, some really funny, enjoyable bits. But to me, I feel like MaXXXine is probably the weakest of the three films, unfortunately. And what jumped out at me immediately, just before the film came out, was this idea that, we're going to be bringing in all these celebrities. You've got Halsey in the movie, Giancarlo Esposito. You've got Elizabeth Debicki, multiple, but Bobby Cannavale, Michelle Monaghan. It was like, okay, we're really stacking this with a decent number of recognizable people. And again, it's like the overstuffing your superhero film with too many villains or too many good guys right away. And watching the movie, it was like, oh, hey, there's Giancarlo, there's Bobby Cannavale, and everyone's there kind of doing like a little bit, like a fun old Hollywood bit. And that's about it, though. I'm like, oh, there's Halsey. Yeah, she's in the movie for a few minutes, and, it's no knock on her performance. She's fine. The few lines that she has, it's like, it's good. Did this need to be a role played by Halsey? No. Did she bring something to it that was like elevating? Not necessarily. No, it's just kind of like another name to have, or a recognizable face perhaps. And that's fine, because I felt the same about Bobby Cannavale. I'm like, all right, he's here doing his shtick and this old, like, I wanted to be an actor, but now I'm a cop, and I'm going to hit you with all this assumptive stuff. And it's like, sure, okay. It just feels like it really underutilized Mia Goth, especially after how the film starts. And where it goes, I don't know, it wasn't the most interesting thing. It was fine. It kind of gets a little goofy, a little silly towards the end. Um, I don't know. It was all right. It was good. Definitely not anywhere close to the level of X, even, I would say, just as far as entertainment value goes, shock value, story, characters. It just, everything was a little more thinly veiled for MaXXXine's case, unfortunately. And so I would recommend that, if you've seen the other two, I'm sure you would enjoy MaXXXine. This would be the case of like, go see Horizon in the theater and wait for MaXXXine to hit VOD, because as far as the theatrical experience goes, I think one is far more worth the other. And I understand that in today's day and age, just getting out to see one movie for people is tough. The average movie that people see in a year is like something like 4 or something like that, or it was for a while. So I know when I go to all these movies and I'm like, you guys need to do this, go see this here, go do that there. You should just go see anything in the theater if you can. But there will always be some I recommend over others if you've got to see one or the other. So MaXXXine, you could probably wait for home. Now another one that I caught in the theaters, and this was a late night, probably a 9:30, 9:45 showtime at AMC, which means it's really not going to start till like 10:30 after all the trailers and after Nicole Kidman comes out and tells me why she loves movies. And so Kinds of Kindness, though, had been on my radar since it was announced that it was going to be playing at Cannes. It's the follow-up to Yorgos Lanthimos' Poor Things, not necessarily, just follow-up film. Going back to writing his own stuff with his old writing partner as well from some of his earlier work, Efthimis Philippou. And the two of them really have a dark, twisted, funny, and just very interesting outlook on a lot of things in life, but specifically power, sex, what people are willing to do and compromise in order to get what they want, or maybe climb the ladder a little easier, looking at how suggestive people are. In a lot of ways, watching some of Yorgos's films and watching this one as well reminded me of, I think it's Speak No Evil, which is a foreign film that's going to have a new James McAvoy remake, I believe, this year. And the basis of that movie is like, some people will just let things happen to them, unfortunately. Bad as they might be, will not get themselves out of uncomfortable situations because they don't want to. And specifically in that case, like, oh, we had your child sleeping in our bed naked, because you guys were asleep and didn't let him into your room. And it's like, that's weird. We should go. That's not okay. But then it's like, we're guests in their house, so maybe we shouldn't say anything. And it's like, no, absolutely not. But this is a real, these movies would not hit the way that they do if there was not some level of truth. And, a lot of people are sheep. I'm sure most of you have heard that expression as well. Leaders and followers, this is nothing new, but how Yorgos explores a lot of those themes and a lot of these oddities and just weird scenarios in the world is always fascinating. And he's just a very, he can be an aggressive filmmaker sometimes too, just with his presentation, the nature of some of these stories. And so I went into Kinds of Kindness really knowing nothing about it other than Emma Stone does this kind of funky dance in the trailer. Jesse Plemons is in the movie and Willem Dafoe's in the movie. So I'm like, cool, this is going to be a funky, weird movie, and I'm just going to go in blind. And I knew it was almost like 3 hours. So I was like, okay, I'm in for a treat. I'm in for something long. So, at 10 o'clock-ish, 10:30, the movie finally starts. And about like 45, 50 minutes in, credits start rolling. And I'm like, wait, no way. I'm checking my watch. I'm like, I didn't just like pass out and wake up and the movie's done. No, as it turns out, Kinds of Kindness, which repeats 3 times on its poster, there's your first clue, is actually like 3 little vignettes almost, 3 short stories, all using the same actors, kind of recycling characters, some of whom kind of are slight variations of one another, maybe different scenarios that they're now exploring than the previous short. All of which, again, kind of revolve around power, the importance that we place in other people's value of us, their beliefs of us. There's anything from weird cults where people are trying to purify their bodies and making sure they're not sleeping with other sexual partners so as not to disrupt their cult leader's system. But if you're good, if you don't have these impurities, you get to stay. And you get to live this lavish life and you get to make love to him, to his wife, to anybody who is essentially clean in their eyes. And, they'll give you odd tasks to go run and, really weird kind of tasks to go run. And Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons certainly in that little vignette, or that little short, they're great. Odd as hell. And, it's this interesting side of just, I know Poor Things really blew the floodgates open in terms of like, Emma Stone, what are you doing? And people are like, I didn't know that she could have sex in a movie or like multiple times. And like, again, Poor Things is just like if you've never seen a Yorgos movie before, or if you booted up Disney Plus and you were like, oh, I'm on Disney Plus and here's a movie they're recommending with Emma Stone, and then it's like, oh wow, I was not prepared to see any of that. There's not as much of that here in Kinds of Kindness. There's definitely still some shocking stuff or some very like how close to the edge can we take this? And Emma Stone will go there. And so, I mean, it's twofold of like, I can understand she's La La Land and she's this young, easy, she did Easy A. I'm like, she's been a capable, sexual, empowered actress. Just an actress, as long as she's been doing this. And so these films certainly highlight a sexual aspect of life more than other directors, for sure. And so there's definitely moments in a couple of these vignettes too where you're like, oh, whoa, oh, wow. There's one other guy in the movie theater, and it's one of those like kind of look back at each other like, oh wow, we just saw that. Okay. Lots of shocking stuff. Willem Dafoe and the three different roles that he plays in this film. He's just such a great actor. It's a very, some of them are very weird, or it's like the essence is, in each short, he's essentially a man with power, the man with power that all of these people are kind of vying to impress. So much so that it's like, hey, I will give you a schedule of everything in your life, from when you're allowed to have sex, when you're allowed to eat, when you go to bed, what you read before you go to bed, when you go off and you pleasure yourself, like just to the T every day. And I think so much of it, again, speaks to what people are willing to let go of in terms of just, hey, I want someone to tell me how to live my life, and I will do everything to the letter for you if that provides me with stability and comfort. And you get these great gifts, and all you have to do is just exactly what he asks of you. Then again, you might get rewarded. You might get to sleep with him sometimes. You might get to sleep with him and his wife. He might want your wife to go, just all sorts of interesting, random, now that we're in 2024 and everything is becoming, I don't want to say more regular, but there are certainly less haggles about people's sexual lives now, or a lot of things are a lot more open than they've ever been before. So that kinds of kindness, very interesting. Certainly has a lot to say. Says it somewhat aggressively sometimes. Darkly comedic. Twisted in a couple different ways that you're like, oh, I thought that might be coming, and I was hoping that he might not do it, but oh, he did it. Very interesting. I'm still, a week later, still kind of processing some of these sketches, and some are not sketches, some of the shorts, and some of the deeper meaning from them too. But just, incredible acting performances all around. Margaret Qualley, Hong Chow, Willem Dafoe, Emma Stone, Jesse Plemons, they're all aces. You just have to understand that Yorgos's movies always have more than a bit of absurdity in them. If you've seen The Lobster, if you've seen The Favorite, if you've watched Dogtooth, if you've seen Killing of a Sacred Deer, there is a lot of oddity, a lot of quirkiness, and a lot of just kind of like uncomfortableness in there that's baked in, that's very human, that is something everybody experiences. But again, these are things that nobody loves to talk about or nobody wants to openly discuss because, God forbid, you talk about power, sex, money, any of these things, out loud, and what people may think of you. And again, that's part of what this movie speaks to as well, is just this idea of wanting people to accept you, or wanting to just have, somebody believe in you, or somebody, desire you in a certain way. These are human instincts and things that we can't fight. Much as people want to say, I don't need anybody. That's a lie. That's a lie. Everybody needs someone. Everybody wants somebody. Everybody wants something. And the question is, what are you willing to do to get that? And Yorgos always has a very interesting depiction of what people will do, and how they will go and get what they want. So kinds of kindness, very fascinating, funny, dark, weird, probably is not for everybody. And again, is maybe a little bit lighter than Poor Things, but also just very shocking in some other ways too. So you just have to know what you're getting into, I would say, before you just jump in and say, like, this movie's screwed up, this guy's a weirdo, he is a weirdo, but people are weird, So I'm weirdly might have enjoyed this more than I enjoyed Poor Things. I haven't revisited Poor Things since my first watch. I've certainly read and participated in enough discourse about it, but a second watch will happen eventually, and I'd be curious to see maybe how that thought has changed. So that takes care of most of our theatrical reviews, or things at least that I've seen in theaters. Now on VOD, you've got The Bike Riders, which we just kind of talked about last episode. Mike Nichols, with a bunch of guys who think, yeah, it's going to be great to start a little biker club. And it is, and it was for a while. And like as it happens in life, sometimes things just grow too large to control, especially when it comes to adult men who ride motorcycles and want to keep expanding. And then you got people causing trouble. And it is a very interesting portrait of life before biker gangs as we know it kind of became this rough and tough, we'll just kick the shit out of you, burn things down, cause trouble. And just really looking at how all the things that maybe we admire in film as well, thinking, oh God, I wish I could be that guy. I want to be the leader or something like that. But heavy lies the crown. Heavy lies the head that wears the crown. Uh, power is corruptible, or sometimes it just is too much to handle, and it can really swing things for you. And so that Bike Riders, very interesting in that regard. Not my favorite Mike Nichols movie. Definitely interesting, though. I've seen a lot of discourse where, guys were like, hey, there aren't a ton of movies where guys can be sad and guys can get together and share in something like this. And I can agree with that. I think that's kind of like the Fall Guy argument where it's like, no, this is like a movie that glorifies and puts those stunt guys on the pedestal they deserve. But it's just Ryan Gosling. And he's got like 9 stunt guys in the movie. So wouldn't it be cool if this movie really does honor stunt people? Why don't we have them like in the front of the film? Why don't we have their faces and names throughout the movie? I don't, it was just one of those weird, like, you can champion it being a good movie, just don't make it more than it is. And so I'm like, yeah, is this like a kind of mental health film for men? I guess you could say that to a degree. Jeff Nichols' films are definitely meditations in oftentimes what men are dealing with, whether it's fatherhood, whether it's, being a father figure, which certainly is something the film touches on. You've got Tom Hardy kind of looking to Austin Butler's character through some adult, like more fatherly eyes, but then also this side of like, I might be too deep and this is the guy that everybody wants to be, so he should be the leader. You know, everybody thinks that someone else has got it made. Everybody thinks that, oh, they don't have any problems. Like, hey, he should be the guy. Because what they don't really know is that I've got a lot of problems. And then you find out, well, everybody's got a lot of problems. So I think if we were really going to dive deep into that, I think there maybe were a couple missed opportunities to spend a little time with some of the family. But again, having the almost kind of female-led perspective of the film and telling the story for these men who probably would not come out with all this information willingly, sure, it certainly speaks to a more silent era for men where, again, I'm just going to go and I'm going to leave and I'm going to go for a ride and I'm going to ride my problems away on a bike, to be clear. So Bike Riders, definitely worth a watch if you need something interesting, I would say. But if you're going with the VOD route, if you're going to watch something at home, I would check out The New Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. 300 some years after the events of the Matt Reeves last couple of that trilogy, the Caesar trilogy, Rise, Dawn, and War for the Planet of the Apes. Caesar has since, it's been at least a few hundred years, a few generations since Caesar had been killed. You're looking at an America and a world that has continued to just grow, naturally overgrown, taking over cities. You could hardly make out that there were buildings in some places before. Apes have only continued to grow more intelligent, and humans are incredibly scarce, and even the ones that you find have just continued to regress in their cognitive abilities as the apes kind of grew smarter from this flu. There was a tenderness to this Apes movie that I really enjoyed, just between Noah who's played by Owen Teague, and just how he sees the world and how he begins to interact with it once he leaves his clan. This look at how religion and certain teachings can be warped over the course of, hundreds of years. This is only hundreds of years, mind you. This isn't quite like the Bible or anything like that. But you've got teachings that are warped by different clans, and some who completely disregard what Caesar had to say at all. And you've got elders who choose to tell their own stories of how the apes came to be, or what time before their, enlightenment looked like for apes. And so, they're still stumbling upon different human resources and things that, could showcase to the apes, like, wow, look how intelligent people were that they were able to build this. But now we kind of have a better understanding of this. And so it just, for that alone, I found the movie really fascinating, because it's not just all action. It's not necessarily the all-out war that maybe Dawn and War for the Planet of the Apes felt like, but very curious to see this blend too of maybe how similar apes and humans are after all, and the things that fascinate both of us, and how some of those are just inherent to curious creatures. So the voice acting, the CGI, everything, top notch. And again, I'm always the advocate for these movies, especially. Give me apes for like the whole movie. There could be like a human or two, but I want the focus to be on the apes. And this is a film almost completely populated with orangutans, gorillas, apes, chimps, all kinds of different monkeys that have been brought together for one great cause. So Wes Ball did a fantastic job with this film, and I hope it continues to make money while it's still playing in theaters and on VOD. Because there's another planned trilogy, I believe, that this will kind of lead into. But I'm very curious to see where it goes and how it can kind of divert from that original Planet of the Apes kind of Mars storyline as well. So I think it's definitely worth a watch if you are looking for something good this afternoon. Just to touch on a couple little movie news things just before we wrap up here. Not movie news, but if you are on Netflix like anyone else in the world, Lost is back on Netflix. Arguably the greatest show of all time. Again, another one where was every episode or every season perfect? No. Was everything answered by the end? No. But did you feel a lot while you watched the show? Yes. Does it say so much about humanity and life and what's important? Yes. It is undoubtedly just one of the greatest, if not the greatest, TV shows of all time. And Michael Giacchino, I can just hear the word lost, and I'm transported thinking about his themes for life and death. Boonerol, I'm just beautiful, beautiful show. Incredible actors on that show who, unfortunately, a lot of them never really did too much bigger than Lost. From Terry O'Quinn to Evangeline Lilly. I'm blanking on his last name now. Josh, who played Sawyer. Good old Freckles. It is such an incredible, incredible show. If you have never watched Lost, if you've only watched part of it, now is the time to go on Netflix and to binge it. You will not be disappointed. And if you also don't live under a rock, you probably saw the Gladiator 2 trailer dropped. And I've only watched a snippet because, again, this was like a cautiously optimistic, all right, a second Gladiator. I know Ridley Scott's more than capable. I'm interested, and I take one peek at the trailer, and it's like we've got a naval battle inside the Colosseum, which is stuff that actually really did happen in ancient times, and they would keep the Colosseum filled with water, and there's freaking naval battles going up. On top of the picture I saw of Denzel Washington's character, like this movie, I'm stoked. It's hard not to be giddy about this. Ridley Scott is just a hell of a filmmaker. They just announced finally that this kind of 6-hour extended director's cut of Napoleon will finally be released now that it's got an R rating, much more than maybe I thought it was R when it first came out. Maybe it was PG-13, but no, I'm totally down for extended edition Napoleon. Ridley Scott, I think this is his 9th director's cut, which, again, I will always take a director's cut. I am always interested to see the full version to see what they had in mind. And, Zack Snyder's got a few of those director's cuts, but Ridley Scott's got 9. So this is where I know where people's beef really lies. It's not about the director's cut. It never was. And last but not least, my favorite film of last year, Godzilla -1, is finally coming to 4K disc. I have just purchased the Japanese collector's edition in 4K on Blu-ray. Crazy 4-disc. You got Godzilla's face just right on the front. I'm looking at it now. I'm going to get better at some of the screen sharing stuff. This is admittedly the side of doing video where, I could probably, now that I got the office, now that I got the setup with the posters, the Justice League swag, everything, I'm going to work on getting better doing some of this in video and out of video editing. But it's just glorious. Godzilla -1. If you've got Netflix, watch it. It's incredible. The black and white minus color edition is going to be released at some point later this summer. So again, if you've got Netflix, check that out there. But in September, we will be getting the Godzilla -1 4K collector's edition. So you can go to Godzilla.com and get that, because that's what I did. Should have got the poster and the sweatshirts when they had them too. But shoulda, coulda, woulda. Thank you again for indulging me for over 40 minutes. I hope this style of episode recording is something that works for y'all. It's definitely more convenient sometimes to just do all in one rather than the individual episodes. But if you like the individual episodes and you want more of a focus like that, let me know, because I'm happy to, I'm happy this thing is still growing. NT Movie Reviews will continue to grow. And so I want to make sure that it happens in a way that is, conducive to a good listening environment, or good, I want you to get what you're looking for. So, we'll get better with the timestamps too, at least in these. So, all right, I'm just going to skip Godzilla. Let me hear about the new Yorgos. I'm going to make that happen for you. Thanks again, you guys. You can find all of our stuff, NT Movie Reviews, nicktiffany.com. You can find us on all social media networks, podcast platforms, and on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in. Summer movie season continues to roll on, so stay tuned. We're going to have twisters, long legs, whole bunch of good stuff coming up. Take care, and thanks again.